Welcome to a special episode of Newsflash. Today, we are going to Brazil for a special story about corruption, political gamesmanship, bribery, money laundering, drama, and so much more. Today, we're going to be talking about Operation Car Wash, the story that shook Brazil and has since March of 2014. To be more specific, March 17th, 2014, where Brazilian police raided a gas station in the state capital of Brasilia, where they arrested a man suspected of money laundering there. He was a known money launderer, and his name was Alberto Youssef. But this wasn't just your average money laundering case, as Brazilian officials and soon Brazil and the world would soon find out. As head prosecutor at the time, Jato began to look through some of these records that he had received when he raided the gas station and arrested Alberto Youssef, and he began to find something that immediately raised suspicions. He was paying third party for a Land Rover Evoque for a top executive at this Brazilian state-owned oil company, Petrobras. Keep that in mind, it'll be very important as the story goes on. That director's name was Roberto Costa, and he immediately became the central target for Dallagnol and his crew in this big investigation. And more evidence of money laundering would be uncovered to the tune of $8 million. So Costa and the original money launderer Youssef were arrested, leading to plea bargains with a special task force office set up in the city of Curitiba. And they really started to say that this was larger than anything they could have possibly imagined. And the phrase used very frequently was tip of the iceberg, and what a big iceberg it was. Their info kickstarted a wide-ranging investigation affecting 11 Latin American countries. As of 4 years in, this is back in 2018, this count was, 150 plus politicians and executives has been convicted and arrested for their roles in the case. This thing was huge. And by the way, still very much is today. Shaking not only Brazil, but the entire continent of South America, and by extension the world, as some of these economies and multinational corporations affected really have influence and ties all over the world to its core. As Costa described it in his plea deal testimony, the way this thing worked was a cartel of companies dealt with the state-owned oil company Petrobras, and they acted in a way where they coordinated to allocate different construction projects among just those companies, kind of fixing the prices. They even had a secret agreement, a constitution or a charter of sorts for their little band that nominated members of the club, and the members would be companies, to build things that Petrobras needed built. For example, oil rigs, refineries, stuff like that. These companies were kind of the 16 championship club members, as they called themselves, and Petrobras executives were bribed to go along with this, paying way too much to these companies for things they want to build, and the bribes filtered into the contracts. The scheme wasn't just used on Petrobras. The same tactics were also used to build Olympic and World Cup stadiums, also major infrastructure projects throughout the country. In his testimony, Costa named some of these companies as Odebrecht, Camargo, Correa, André Gutierrez, Isa, Angevix, Mendes Jr., and UTC, with the biggest and most shocking one being Odebrecht. Dallagnol and his team had eyes for them next. Finally, in June 2015, the raid on these cartel members was carried out, and in an unprecedented step, 12 top executives were arrested. Just like in the U.S., big businessmen are not normally taken down, so this action caused a major stir. One of the biggest people arrested was Marcelo Odebrecht, CEO of the aforementioned Odebrecht company, started by his grandfather. Odebrecht was the largest construction company, and still is the largest construction company in Latin America to this day, operating in countries the world over. The bribing operation they had was very extensive and very well protected. The prosecutor's investigation of Odebrecht in particular was met with stonewalling and denials for a long time, until Delton Delagnol and his team found payments going directly to the accounts of the executives at Petrobras, making the money very easy to track. On March 8, 2016, Odebrecht was sentenced to 19 years in prison for money laundering. Odebrecht, devastated and kind of crushed that his whole strategy of stonewalling denial had come falling down on him and he was actually going to prison, started talking. According to the authorities, Odebrecht had an accounting system set up off the books to pay off company execs and even politicians. The politicians of all major parties were given kickbacks for appointing Petrobras executives. Dozens of ministers, politicians, and congressmen were implicated. All of this was happening under the presidency of Lula Inácio da Silva, the incredibly popular president of Brazil since 2002, swept in on a leftist Workers' Party wave. He had been successful in lifting millions of Brazilians out of poverty and was for this extraordinarily popular, enjoying at some points an 87% approval rating. But in 2010, he was term limited out of office, and his successor, Dilma Rousseff, took over. They were both from the Workers' Party, and for various corruption allegations loosely related to Operation Car Wash, Lula da Silva was imprisoned and Dilma Rousseff was impeached, leading to a devastating blow for the Brazilian left, once thought to be unstoppable. Meanwhile, in America, Delagnol's team was delivering devastating blow after devastating blow to Odebrecht. The United States Department of Justice efficiency in identifying money laundering crimes was huge in helping them, and in December of 2016, Odebrecht pleaded guilty to charges helped uncovered by the Americans to providing $800 million in bribes for 100-plus projects in 12 countries. Odebrecht ended up paying $3.5 billion in fines and exposed details of how they did their corruption in Latin America and Africa. And they had the same system every time. A fake company was found in Panama that sent money from Odebrecht to Swiss accounts set up by Mossack Fonseca. You may remember them from the Panama Papers, where they set up shell companies for billionaires the world over to launder money through at a blistering rate, and they did this for Odebrecht as well. They were incredibly effective at doing it, especially in Panama. Obviously, that's where they operate. And over time, Odebrecht established a pretty massive foothold in Panama, as well as Latin America, Africa, and across the world, really, but really no more strong and potent than in Panama. They had $9 billion worth of projects going on there, which was a pretty incredible amount. They were considered to be the biggest construction company in Panama, as they weren't even from Panama. And the thing is, they had those $9 billion in projects ongoing in Panama, which they paid a lot of money for, to the tune of tens of billions of dollars for in bribes. An example of this was the Coast Highway built in Panama, which, using the same system they used with Petrobras, were able to get paid way more than market value for. And this was all due to, many believe, bribes they paid officials, resulting in a $60 million price increase for the project nearly overnight. Odebrecht paid $220 million in fines to Panama and spilled about public corruption deals they had. The thing was, though, overall, Odebrecht, most would say, probably cost Panama around $2 to $3 billion, but ended up paying nearly $300 to $500 million when all was said and done. That sounds like a profitable business margin to me. Like a virus, the influence of Odebrecht has kind of spread through all the major countries in Latin America and their political classes and infiltrated them. Another place where this took place was Peru. Alejandro Toledo was Peru's president from 2001 to 2006. He transferred money from offshore accounts to close friends, and how did he get that money? Well, it's Odebrecht. Odebrecht got paid to build a major highway in Peru under Toledo's reign. He was paid $20 million in bribes, or at least that's what the prosecutors say, to give Odebrecht the project. Jose Barada, the head of Odebrecht in Peru, who eventually did end up talking to prosecutors, said the final deal was struck at the Copacabana Marriott in Brazil, and Toledo was present. Toledo currently is in the U.S. and is still trying to be extradited to Brazil, but they are Peru to face charges of corruption, but no one's quite gotten to him yet. Odebrecht tried to also support left-wing Peruvian party candidates, with Barada being asked by Marcelo Odebrecht himself to contribute $3 billion to the leftist campaign run by Ollanta Humala after the fall of Alejandro Toledo, trying to take his place. And it was not only because he thought the leftist party had the best chance of winning, it's because he wanted to try to curry favor with the incredibly powerful, at the time, Workers' Party back in his home country of Brazil, the home base of operations for Odebrecht, and where Odebrecht did still do quite a lot of his business. The Workers' Party wanted unified leftist parties throughout South America, and the Peruvian president, after Toledo, Ollanta Humala, was arrested and awaits trial for receiving bribes from Odebrecht. So they definitely did get to him there. Specifically for a similar pay-to-play type system where they would kind of be assumed to get the first bids on major contracts, major construction opportunities, as they had due to their significant investment of $20 million in Alejandro Toledo. So they expected that, but as of now, the Ollanta Humala is in prison, along with his wife, who is the general secretary of the Nationalist Party in Peru. They are both in prison and awaiting trial for, obviously, corruption. The funny thing is the conservative opposition also is being investigated as well for their dealings with, you guessed it, Odebrecht, specifically to fund the opposition leader's campaign for president after the tragic demise, we shall say, of Ollanta Humala. Next up was Pedro Pablo Kuczynski, who had a little bit of a rough road. On the 15th of December 2017, the Congress of the Republic over in Peru initiated impeachment proceedings against Kuczynski, while the congressional opposition stated that he had lost the moral capacity to lead after he admitted to receiving advisory fees from the scandal-hit Brazilian construction company, you guessed it, Odebrecht, while he was Peru's Minister of the Economy and Finance between 2004 and 2005. He had denied previously receiving any payments from Odebrecht, but later confessed that his company, Westfield Capital, had been receiving money from Odebrecht for advisory services, while still denying that irregularities existed in the payments. He also got some pretty controversial backlash after pardoning Alberto Fujimori, who had to literally resign because of murder. After further scandals broke surrounding Kuczynski, a second impeachment vote was to be held on the 22nd of March 2018. 2 days before the vote, Kuczynski stated that he would not resign and decided to face impeachment process a second time, as the first one obviously was successful. Again, he was going to be impeached here for corruption reasons. So the thing that happened the next day was, on March 21st, 2018, day before this impeachment vote was supposed to happen, a video was released of Kuczynski allies, including his lawyer and Kenji Fujimori, attempting to buy the vote against impeachment from one particular official. Following the release of the video, Kuczynski presented himself before Congress and officially submitted his resignation to the Congress of the Republic. Kuczynski's first vice president, Martin Vizcarra, was later named president of Peru the day after the impeachment vote was supposed to happen. And Vizcarra, thank goodness, right now, still remains president to this day. No corruption scandals yet, as far as we know, but you can only hope with the presidents of Peru at this time. They have been really quite crazy, with Odebrecht and Operation Car Wash scandals in some way bringing down all of the past 3 presidents. Not always while they're in office,